Israel's official position on the Syrian civil war has been strict neutrality. On the other hand, Israel has become involved politically and militarily to prevent the growing influence and entrenchment of Iranian forces and its proxies throughout Syria. Israel's military activity, officially called Operation Chess, has primarily been limited to missile and air strikes targeting Iranian facilities in Syria as well as those of its proxies, especially Hezbollah. These attacks were not officially acknowledged before 2017. Israel has also carried out airstrikes in Syria to disrupt weapons shipments to Hezbollah. Israel has also provided humanitarian aid to victims of the civil war from 2013 to September 2018. An effort that was ramped up after June 2016 with the launch of Operation Good Neighbor. Israel and Syria have technically been in a state of war since 1948. When both came into being, they have fought each other in three major wars: the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the 1967 Six-Day War, and the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Since 1974 there has been a ceasefire arrangement between the two countries along the so-called Purple Line, which has largely been adhered to by both countries, though not by Hezbollah. However, both countries have been involved in the 1982 Lebanon War and the Lebanese Civil War. A number of incidents took place on the Purple Line in the initial phase of the Syrian civil war, straining Israel-Syria relations, including the Quneitra governorate clashes, incidents between the Syrian army and Syrian rebels on the Syrian-controlled side of the Golan and the Golan Neutral Zone, and Hezbollah involvement in the Syrian civil war. Through the incidents, which began in late 2012, as of mid-2014, one Israeli civilian was allegedly killed and at least 4 soldiers wounded. On the Syrian-controlled side, it was estimated that at least 2 unidentified militants, who had attempted to cross into the Israeli-controlled side of the Golan Heights, had been killed. Israel's official position in the Syrian civil war has been strict neutrality. As per various Israeli defense ministers, in July 2017, Israel's defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, said that while the rebels are not our friends, they are all versions of Al-Qaeda. Israel could not allow a man like Bashar al-Assad to remain in power. Keeping Assad in power is not in our security interests. As long as he is in power, Iran and Hezbollah will be in Syria. He said that Israel had no interest in entering the Syrian civil war. But there were red lines Israel had set, such as the smuggling of sophisticated weaponry to Hezbollah and Iran's presence on its borders. Later in July 2017, the Israeli government said it opposed the ceasefire agreement in southern Syria that the United States, Russia, and Jordan had reached a week prior that envisaged establishing the escalation zones along Syria's borders with both Jordan and Israel, as that would legalize Iran's presence in Syria. In October 2017, Lieberman conceded that Assad was winning the war and was now being courted by foreign powers, which he said was unprecedented. The statement was said to have marked a reversal for Israel, where top officials had from the outset of fighting in 2011 until mid-2015 regularly predicted Assad would lose control of his country and be toppled. He called for the US to be more active in the Syrian arena and in the Middle East in general, and noted that Israel was struggling to deal with the Russians, Iranians, and also the Turks and Hezbollah. On the 9th of July 2017, a new ceasefire agreement was directly brokered by the United States and Russia for southwest Syria. The United States and Russia had made a number of attempts in the past to reach an agreement for establishing a ceasefire in different parts of Syria. However, the earlier ceasefire attempts failed to reduce violence for long. US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin reached the agreement during their meeting at the Group of 20 summit in Hamburg, Germany, on the 7th of July 2017. It affects towns, villages and borderlands in 3 regions close to Jordan and Israel. The deal includes establishing the escalation zones, otherwise known as safe zones, along Syria's borders with both Jordan and Israel. The Israeli government opposed the ceasefire agreement, as it claimed that its security interests were not reflected in the draft ceasefire agreement being formulated. It doesn't take almost any of Israel's security interests, and it creates a disturbing reality in southern Syria. The agreement doesn't include a single explicit word about Iran, Hezbollah, or the Shiite militias in Syria. Israel reportedly held secret talks with Russia and the United States over the ceasefire agreement. The Israeli government stressed its desire to remove Iranian forces from Syria. However, it was disappointed, as it argued that the agreement contradicted virtually all the positions Israel had presented to the Americans and